This is the first real podcast that I've done in some time that hasn't been just exclusively a coaching call. I guess I did one last week that was half and half. This is going to be exclusive podcasting material. All right. And it's going to be the greatest show ever. In case you didn't know, the greatest show ever. What did I have last week? I had Spider-Ham. This week I have Weapon X. Yeah. All right. Okay. Here's what's on tap. Not a ton for today. We'll see how long it goes. It might go 10 minutes. It might go an hour. Probably not an hour because it's super friggin' hot. My air went out. So now I'm suffering through in the heat of Midwestern summer, sweating with my dogs. All right. Yeah. I had an interesting conversation today. I think that's worth discussing and bringing up for everyone. And then I've got a couple Q&As, and then that might be it. So we'll see where this goes. All right. So conversation I had with the dude at work today about having a life, a life, get a life, loser, having a life outside the job. We talk about like interests outside law enforcement. That's something they talked about in the academy way back. That's like, yeah, of course. Like you need to have interests outside the job. And I remember thinking like, that's fucking stupid. Like who wouldn't have hobbies or an interest outside the job? And then I got into it and I was like, this is like the coolest job ever. And it consumes your entire identity. Figuring out like what you do on your off time that's not just thinking about work is it really happens. And then it implodes your life. And then you figure out like, oh, that doesn't work. So I need to have some interests that are not related to this job. Because believe it or not, as cool as it is, like people around you really don't give a shit that much. They think your stories are cool, but that's about it. So what are you? Your work is like free entertainment. So instead of watching Cops, because it's been taken off the air, or you're sort of watching it in syndication. But yeah, your stories are, I don't know, just free entertainment. They're water cooler stuff you can tell at dinner parties. You're a clown, more or less, like you're entertainment. So just treat that for what it is and understand, hey, you need to have something more to bring to the table than just goofy work stories about drunks you arrested. Like those kind of lose their luster after a while too. And you really can't be like super honest with people that aren't in like the realm of first responders, at the very least first responders, if not cops directly. Because I've said some things to like medics where they were like, I can't believe you just said that. And so really you can't be like totally open and honest with the people that aren't in this world because they will think you are a psychopath. So just hey, word to the wise. Don't maybe talk about the murder scene the same way you would. And that's difficult. Or just have other interests that you can discuss with people like a normal freaking human being. Yeah. And what that does too is having interests outside the job is it's really cool when you're new. It's really consuming. You don't have a lot of other stuff going on. And as you progress through this career path, then what happens is like your life just gets busier. Maybe you get married, maybe you have kids, maybe, you pick up a side hustle, maybe you start a part-time business, like all kinds of stuff. Maybe you start like doing a sport or starting a band, like whatever, man. Like our lives get busier as we age. We fill up our time with more stuff. And like that means that as far as like 100% of the available pie, like the job doesn't get 100% anymore, and it shouldn't. So you've got other stuff that you're doing. You've got other people that might be counting on you. So they're going to pull your time and attention, and they should. And if they don't, that's an error on your part. So what all that kind of leads to, right, as you progress through, like, why is this important? It's important to be well balanced for one, but it's also important for transitioning out of the job. And this is a big thing that you watch all these cop pages on Instagram and workout, like law enforcement, first responder, fit responders, like whatever, blue line beasts, like whatever, man. They're all talking about like fitness for the job, right? But what nobody really talks about is the fact that the lifespan after retirement is only 5 years. So on average, cops are dead within 5 years of retirement. That is a stat. I talk about it all the time, and it is very critical to understand. Like, you understand, the more stress that you put in on the front end, if you don't buffer that and you don't figure out how to manage your stress throughout the life of your career, you will cash your chips in early. And that's just how nature works. That's how your body works. That's how stress works. That's how stress accumulation, chronic stress over 20, 30 years, that's how it works. So you have to understand that. So what does having, again, let's go back to what is having interest outside the job? Like, what does that do for you when you're ready to be done with this? So say you get your 20 on or whatever your department is that you can retire it at this specific arbitrary marker, right? Let's say it's 20. Okay. So you've got other stuff going on. You've got kids, you've got business, you've got hobbies, maybe like camping, whatever the fuck you like to do, right? You have a different part of yourself that you can move into, and then that gets a bigger chunk of the pie. And then you transition into that because that's piquing your interest more, or it's time to do that, man. You can't do this job forever, nor should you. It's really cool. You have a lot of cool adventures, but at some point, like, you need to go have different adventures. You have to go have a different story, and you have to transition into a different part of your life. And that's really hard to do for everybody. It's a hard thing to do. Think back to high school. How many people did you graduate with that had a hard time transitioning out of high school? Maybe they're still living in your high school town. You're like, remember Joe? Yeah, Joe's a freaking loser. He just hangs out at the local bar. He just does like whatever. He never left. He's a townie. He never did anything. Okay. And maybe that's what he wanted, but maybe he just couldn't transition. Same thing is true of college, right? And the same thing is very true of athletes. Athletes, I saw this in high school and in college, where your whole identity is wrapped up in being especially a football player, and it's not anymore. So now what am I? And cops do this horribly bad, right? Horribly bad, where it's I've been this thing for 20, 30 years. And it's been such a consuming part of what I am and who I am that now it's gone. And I don't have anything to move to. If I don't have another mission to move to, if I don't have another interest to move into, that's why we die. That's why we die. 5 years, that's why we die. Viktor Frankl talked about it. Like, what is the purpose of life? The purpose and meaning of life is to give life meaning. And if you can't give life meaning, if you can't give this place meaning, it ain't going to last. It's not going to stick around. So all of that stress and all of the sacrifice that you made on the job for 20, 30 years, and then you have nothing to move to because you invested all of your time, like 100% of it. Like, you sacrificed everything outside of work, outside of your shift, outside of your specialty units, like all of it. You sacrificed all of it for that. I think that's an error, especially as you get into the later years of your career. I hate to say taper down, but maybe it's not taper down is maybe not the right way to put it, because like I said, this job has a great opportunity to see life for what it truly is and to have daily adventures that most people will never even get to experience one, let alone every shift, right? So you don't want to waste that and not experience those things, because that's an error in and of itself as well. But as you progress, you have to start looking at exit strategies. That's probably a better way to look at it. Maybe not tapering down, but exit strategies. And that's something that I've been looking into. I've got like over 15 years on now. And sometimes you wonder, like, how in the hell did this happen? But now it's okay. So how long am I going to stick around here? What am I going to do after? How am I going to transition into something else? Yeah. So these are conversations that you need to have and you need to understand. And I would say this is a concept that really needs to get brought into the academy setting, into the early years of new cops. Because if we did that, man, you could have two to 5 years of brainstorming, like 2 to 5 years of implementation, and then 2 to 5 years of like getting ready to transition. And so it's a whole process. It's like this thing in the back burner. It's almost like a thesis. It's like this thing in the back burner that's going on the whole time while you're going through this stuff. You really have to do that. And on top of that, like, you want to talk about business opportunities. This is another thing that we discussed today. This job is one of the worst places to make money, right? In the sense of you're literally trading every minute of your day for money. You can't make money not giving your time. You can't do it. So how do you make more money on this job? You just have to work more. You have to work more. You have to be in a parking lot working part-time. You have to pick up extra shifts. You have to put yourself back in the uniform, back in the squad, and then get out and do it. And it's miserable. It is absolutely god-awful miserable. Figure out a way to create another alternate revenue stream. That is the way to do it, right? And in this job, we create and learn many marketable skills. And you see some people do it and some people do it well, and then they exit with a good business plan, or they get hired on with a company in the private sector and doing whatever, right? Maybe it's computers, maybe it's security, maybe it's whatever. And they do really well, right? You got to understand how to use the skills that we have developed and how to market them and how to create another revenue stream while we're working. The trick with that is making sure that you don't do it on the clock. So that would be my suggestion. Anyway, wrapping that up, the big point to take away is learning to be able to transition into another part of your life. And to do that, you have to have things that you're interested in that are outside the job, right? Or that are related to the job, but not exactly that. Yeah, transition. If you don't have another mission to move to, it's just not going to go well at all. Okay, there we go. Yeah, somebody's not happy. Okay, let's go to questions. All right, so a little tactical nutrition stuff. All right, got a question from one of the Heroic 28 participants, Heroic 28 athletes, like whatever we're calling them. All of those things are true, athletes and participants. All right, so go out of town for work a lot for a night or two, and in places like fairs, career events, military bases, etc., where I can't bring meals and the available food options are very limited. What should I do in situations like that? All right, so you're talking about a short period of time. Okay, so you got to look at, number one, what's the big picture? So that's a small picture. What's the big picture? How often are we doing that? How often are we going out of town? How is it, like every weekend, or is it like once a year? So looking at that, you go out for work. So it looks like it's semi-regularly. So that's number one. All right. So if it wasn't regularly, if it was like just once in a while, then I wouldn't stress about it. Maybe have a little fun, go out and get maybe a lower quality, like local meal, experience the sights, see the sights. But if it's a regular or semi-regular thing, if you do that, you'll derail yourself, right? You'll end up eating too much, or you'll end up eating too low quality food. And it's just going to compound because it's all the time. So you just have to go to the basics. You got to get your protein number in. You have to get your protein number in. That is always a non-negotiable. If you get your protein in, then the rest will work itself out. I can promise that. Okay. I have not seen anybody who hits their protein number and then continues to screw things up. Okay. It's very difficult to do. All right. And if you, along with that, if you get your water in, if you get water and protein, the rest of those things will totally work itself out. And then you don't have to really stress about it at all. Another option is to take because you're not going to be working for 24 hours, right? Career events. Sounds like recruiting stuff. You're working like 8 hours. And it's not going to be fun, but you can always just not eat. If there's no options and you're not prepared, and you're like, dude, all they got are crappy granola bars and I don't know, pick something like whatever, donuts, right? Donuts, probably donuts and pastries and like junk food, right? Just hanging out. Okay. Don't eat anything. Like that is acceptable. We've been talking a lot about time restricted feeding, right? Talking a lot about time restricted feeding. And I'm a big proponent of 12 and 12, right? So 16-8, as far as like intermittent fasting, I think that is, start looking into some of the studies that they developed that 16-8 like fasted window, like fast for 16 hours, 8-hour feeding window. And a lot of that was just based on arbitrary decisions of like, well, how are we going to do this? It's easier for the lab to do that at shift change and to have this be the feeding window of 8 hours. So it's arbitrary. A 12-hour fasted window followed by a 12-hour eating window, like that is a pretty good, successful schedule for most people, especially with the shift work, right? So say you work 12s, right? You fast for your shift and then you eat for the rest of it, or you fast for half of your shift and then you eat for the second half of your shift, and then 6 hours when you're done, or you just basically you look at these blocks and you just slide them around. So that's really all you have to do here. You just look at your fasting window and you just just use that 8 hours as part of that window. So you can just extend your feeding window later into the evening. And there's some downfalls to that too. It might do a few things that aren't optimal, but that's not the end of the world. And it's just for once in a while. That's what I would do especially if it's an event, and it's an event that you're working. You can also do stuff like just bring a protein shake, do a protein shake, do the Vital Proteins collagens, just do a smoothie. Like those are options too. If fasting is not an option, if you're like, oh, I'm gonna go crazy if I can't eat, or honestly, this is like a me problem, but if I get overwhelmingly hungry, right? And then like stress stacks up or whatever, it's, oh man, I've got 3 hours left in my fasting window. But man, those donuts, I can only say no to those donuts so many times, and then they are all being destroyed. Okay. That's a me problem. Okay. But if that's going to happen, and it's, man, we really got to take the edge off, or we got to get a couple hundred calories in, we got to get 200 to 400 calories in, get some protein in so that we continue to stack wins, right? Stacking wins is important too. So if you are trying to stack wins and you want to get some protein in, get 30, 50 grams of protein in with some collagen powder, with a protein shake, with some jerky, or with smoothie, with all of these things in it. Maybe not the jerky, but all of these things, right? So stack some wins, take the edge off, and get through the day. And it's going to keep you, because it's liquid, it's going to keep you in what's considered a fasted-like state. So it's not exactly fasted because you're going to get some insulin response, right? But it's not a ton, and it's not going to take you too far out of this fasting window. Again, there's pros and cons to all this stuff, but these are just options for that, okay? What you don't want to do is just say, it's too hard, I can't figure out how to do it. You just have to figure out how it fits into the schedule that you're working, right? And it will work if you put the plan in place. And it's really a plan. It failed to plan to fail, right? That's true. And any plan is more successful than no plan. So if you go into these scenarios with no plan, then get ready to be really disappointed with yourself. Develop a plan, come up with a plan. All right, the thing is tomorrow. The recruiting thing, the job fair is tomorrow. I'm going to be here from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. All right. So now we know we're either fasting in that window, we've got food to bring for that, like whatever, right? You've developed the plan. Stick with the plan. And it'll go okay. It might not always go perfect. You're on the road, like traveling sucks as far as trying to be consistent, and it does. But I've seen people succeed really well, and I've seen people fail. So, and honestly, there's some of both. If you're going to do this stuff regularly, you're going to have some trips that you fucking knock it out of the park, and you're going to have other trips where you're like, that did not go the way I wanted. And try to mitigate those as much as you can. How much is your progress worth? Weigh that out. What do I want to get out of the next month? I've got 3 trips: San Diego, San Antonio, and Dallas. I don't know. What's your progress worth? You can't quit your job to just train full time. So you've got to figure out how to navigate life. If your progress is worth it, if your goals are worth it, like, you'll figure out a way to make this plan work. Don't discount that either. Just want it more than you want to stay where you're at. That is a huge factor in all this stuff. Like, you've got to want the results more than you want the excuses. You've got to want the results and the changes more than you want to stay where you're at. You have to. If you don't, then you won't change. It's the same thing with alcoholics. When you talk about drunks, and if you want to, like, you look at like drunks and junkies that we see on the street, some of them stop, some of them recover. Like how they recover, they didn't want to be in this pit anymore, and it was going to kill them, and they figured it out. I'm at the bottom of this pit and I got to get out. A lot of people don't get out. A lot of people don't figure it out. It doesn't hurt bad enough for them to get out. And more, little societal soapbox here, more and more that society allows these pits that we get in to be comfortable. We're in a pit. I'm overweight. I eat like crap. I don't want to be here, but it's comfortable because everything is accessible. Everything is convenient. And the more and more people that join us in that pit, the more we think it's normal. It's not fucking normal. It's not okay. Like, you are not okay where you're at if this is you. So you have to understand, and you have to wake up, and you have to look and say, just because there are a lot of people that are in just as shitty as a position as I am, does not mean that I'm okay. It does not, right? You are not okay there. And you need to get out of this pit. But everything is so convenient in the pit. So why do I need to move? And that's what society is doing. That is what, you have to understand that life is hard. And if there's no challenges to life, this is a universal truth. If your life is so convenient that you don't have any problems that need to be fixed, you will create problems in your life. You will derail things. You will derail relationships. You will create these micro dramas, and you'll create problems because you're avoiding dealing with the real ones. Because it's convenient. Everyone's down in this pit with me. So I'm going to create all these little micro dramas like that don't really matter. Yeah, I know you're probably thinking of somebody right now. Maybe it's you, where it's like they always got some bullshit. They always got some drama. They always got some beef. There's always something stupid going on with them. And it's like, man, why are they always doing this? It's ridiculous. And they got all these other issues that need to be dealt with, but they're dealing with all this minor crap. It's because they're being avoidant. They're being avoidant, and they're being avoidant with taking action with what they maybe know they need to take action of, or they just don't want to look because they know there's something there. Maybe they don't know what it is. Maybe you don't know what it is. There's something that you don't like and you need to change. But again, like, if everything's so convenient that you don't have any problems, then like you'll create them somehow. Like, you will create them and your life will be chaotic because of it. Or you can do a really good assessment and take a really good look at yourself and say, no, I think that I need to get in shape. I think that's probably a number one issue here, or a number two, right? Because we come up with three. All right. So hopefully that wraps that up. And next question. All right. What are things you do to spice up rice or plain foods like that to make them less bland? And what are your go-tos for food meals on the go? All right. Kind of talked about it already. Let's answer that last part first. Food meals on the go. All right. So squad car food. I posted a video about it a little bit ago. Hard-boiled eggs, tuna packets, salt. Sometimes I'll do applesauce packets, like some easy stuff like that. It's not super fun. It's not super exciting. It's not like the greatest meal ever made, but it gets the job done and it keeps the wheels turning. And that's how that is, right? Your meals on the go are not going to be, they're going to be utilitarian, right? They're going to be for the purpose of getting your numbers in, the purpose of fueling you for what you're doing throughout the day, right? That's what they're for. And you got to remember that, like, that is what they're for. And if you get like work lunches will end people's progress. You have to understand, like, work lunches are unnecessary. And if you got to go because everybody's in the office is going to like Applebee's and getting lunch, like, number one, barf, Applebee's. But two, you're going to end up blowing your calories out of the water at lunchtime. And you probably won't work out after work. And then you're probably going to eat too much after the food finally digests for dinner. You're going to be eating dinner late. You're going to be eating too many calories because you didn't train. So you're going to have all these really high calorie super palatable foods, and you're gonna wreck yourself. It's got to be utilitarian. You have to understand that food has several purposes, like fueling and utility is one of them. But what I like doing is really looking at my meals and saying, what's the point of the meal? Is it utility or is it like social connection? Those are the two that I really look at. And then stress is another one, which can be super negative and can create like really disordered patterns of eating. But that is something that needs to be looked at too. Am I eating because I'm stressed? But staying with the two big ones to not get too far off. Am I eating for utility or am I eating for social connection? And you can do both, but you have to understand like what's the primary here. So work lunch, work dinner, like whatever, you're there, or family dinner, like that's a little bit different here. But let's stay with the work thing that makes more sense. What's this meal for? All right. This meal is for networking. Okay. So it's for social connection. Is it? All right. How many of those have you had? What does the rest of your day look like? Is it a lunch? Is it a dinner? Can you afford to spend that money there, right? That budget, that nutritional budget. Can you afford that there? If you can, cool. If you can, that's fine. Then label it as a social connection and understand what you're doing. Okay. And then have a lower quality meal, have a higher calorie meal, but understand that that's going to come back at some other time throughout that day or that week where you're going to have to give one up because you can't have everything. You can't unless you want to have no results. Let's say that you look at it and you're like, all right, this is a meal for social connection, but primarily I need this for utility. So you get to order something bland off the menu. You get to order something, maybe not bland, bland's a bad term, something basic, something high protein, something lower fat, maybe something like less than what everyone else is getting. And most of the time you can get away with that if you just don't like scarf down the breads and do all the extra stuff while people are just sitting around like shooting the shit, doing the networking. So drink water, be firm, know what your meal's for, right? So that's like a little tangent, but I think that's worth discussing. All right. All right. So let's go to the first part of that question. What things do you use to spice up rice and plain foods? You literally use spices, right? Spices are like a kind of a freebie. There are some that have a bunch of sugar and that'll throw your carbs off and all that kind of stuff. But overall, just go to Costco, go to Kroger, go to Meijer, right? Go to your grocery stores and start looking at the spice racks. Just start looking at them. Like you can take beef and you can season it 20 different ways. Changes the meal, right? It's even with just ground beef, white rice, carrots. Okay. Like those three things. Now you make taco seasoning. All right. We got a little taco like night going on. Okay. You can add a little bit of cheese, maybe a little bit of plain yogurt or sour cream. That's going to throw that same consistency in. You can make some tacos, right? And throw some salsa on it. Boom, done, right? If you like Thai food, you add Thai spices or whatever it is, right? It's just beef. And the rice will basically take the form of whatever the meat is, right? So if the beef gets seasoned like Thai food or Mexican food or like whatever, man, like that's what the rice will do. It just is there. That's your main carbohydrate for the meal. And then you garnish that out with your micronutrients, with your veggies, and the red meat's got a ton of micronutrients in it as well. And then you're done. So again, are you eating for taste? Yes, we all do. So you can't like totally negate that, but you also have to understand like, am I eating this because it tastes good, or am I eating this because it is utilitarian for what I need my goals to be? And then you also got to look at like, all right, are you going to have any dessert afterwards? Or do you need to save macros? Do you need to save some numbers? Like that needs to be looked at too. What's your overall plan? All right. Hopefully those short answers give you like a little bit of tactical help with it, but it's hard to really answer them without looking at the strategic plan, which is going to be slightly different for everyone based on what individually you have going on and what your big picture looks like. I think that about wraps it up. And yeah, there you go. All right. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And I think that we're going to get some more guests on. At least I'm going to start pushing to get some more guests on soon. And then, yeah, hit me up if you got any questions. I'm trying to think what email to send to. Just hit me up on social media. Heroic Industries on Instagram and Facebook. So those two, as well as YouTube, follow our social media. And you can hit me up there, right? That'll probably be easiest. That's the stuff I check the most. Until next time, live heroic.